Hello, everyone. Welcome to our psychology workshop, exploring psychology pathways and degrees for transfer. We're so glad that you could join us here today. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen for us. Hopefully you can see it all there, our intro slide. So before we begin, I wanted to just do some quick housekeeping. So one is this session is being recorded and the recording will be available after on YouTube. We can actually add the link to the chat to our YouTube page where you can find several previous sessions, and all future sessions will be located there as well. We also will have a sign-in form, so this will make sure that you can put your name, your email, and indicate if your instructor has offered extra credit for attending today. And then also we will have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to jot down your questions as we move throughout the presentation. But if you do have any issues or concerns during the presentation, please feel free to send a message directly to any one of the hosts. So you should be able to directly message any of the hosts as we go through. So I'm really excited about today's session. This has been an ongoing collaboration with our counselors here. So this is a collaboration between our psychology faculty and our academic counseling team. We have representation from all three colleges today. So I'm really excited to hear more from them. But before we begin, I wanted to do a quick introduction, a round of introductions. So I can start off. Our counselors will introduce themselves and then the other faculty joining us here today. So my name is Kyla Rankin. I'm a professor. I teach intro to psychology, research methods, and statistics for the behavioral sciences, and I'm at Moreno Valley College. And one of the questions we have for us today that we can hear from everyone is, what was our favorite class in undergrad? We're going to be talking about a number of different courses today. And so for me, one of my favorite classes in undergrad actually was a sensation and perception class. I was able to take that after I transferred, and I absolutely loved it. I was really interested in cognitive, but I really got to do a deep dive on sensation and perception, and that was really enjoyable. So I'm going to pass it over to our academic counselors to introduce themselves as well.
I guess I'm next. I'm A. Maria del Rocio Alvarez de Pacheco, long name for, most people call me Dr. Pacheco, to make it easier. My favorite, I'm at Moreno Valley College. I'm one of the counselors there, and I have worked for the district for many, many years, Norco as well for some time, and now I'm Moreno Valley. My favorite class, undergraduate class, neuropsychology. I just saw my neuropsychology instructor from Rio Hondo College, and this person back in the day, she took the liberty of getting funds for us to dissect the brain. So I was so intrigued, not a human brain though, but I was so intrigued by the neurotransmitters and all of the neurons, how it works, and it was just fascinating to me. So that was my introduction to psychology. We did all sorts of experiments in the class, and we were able to accomplish so much more than a regular undergraduate class in that session. So that was my intro, and I loved it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Magno. I've been an RCC counselor. I just finished my 20th year, so long time. Maria and I have grown up together at RCC or in the district. I went to UC Irvine. At the time I did what was called psychology and social behavior. It's changed names a couple times since then, and we'll talk about that today. But my favorite class at the time, I still remember my gerontology class because I didn't know what gerontology was when I took that class, the study of aging and the developmental processes that come as you age. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that, I had a stereotypical view of what I thought psychology was, and that just made me realize that there's so much more to it. In graduate school, I got to study the psychology of college student development, but my gerontology class still sticks with me because I didn't realize that was a developmental phase of life. So happy to be here with y'all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zena Chacon. I'm from Norco College. I have worked within Norco and a few years at RCC for over 20 years as a counselor and professor. I also, my My favorite undergrad class, I was really young when I started college, but it was developmental psychology. So I love working with my psychology faculty and my sociology faculty, and because those were some of the near and dear classes that I liked. I liked watching the, different stages that we went through, and it really made sense when I was growing up to learn about those stages.
I can go next. I'm Dr. Wilson. I teach psychology classes at Norco, and my favorite undergrad class was actually biopsych. Even though I ended up going into social psych, it was one of the ones that I took last, and I think that it just brought everything together. I was like, oh, okay, here's the biology under everything that I've been learning about, and was so mind-blowing to figure out how the brain worked. So even though that's not what I ended up going into, that was the most fun to me.
Cool. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I'll go next. My name is Dr. Roberto Perez. I am primarily at the Norco College campus, teaching a bunch of classes there, biopsych, statistics, all that fun stuff. My favorite undergraduate class that I took in psychology was one that I actually took as like an operative psychology class called Learning and Memory. So that class spent the entire time focusing on how learning actually works, right? We know practice makes perfect, but what does that mean in terms of those neurons, right? How do the neurons change and adapt to the things we learn? That was a cool class. I would recommend it wherever you go. Cool.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Professor Cody Jensen. I teach at Norco College. I teach a lot of developmental sections of psychology. So if you want to take developmental at Norco, I'm kind of your guy to do that. One class that really stuck out with me in my undergrad was taking a psychology of social relationships class. A really specific niche class, but it's really cool to see how our relationships are different between our parents versus authority figures versus our friends versus romantic relationships, and see the psychology of all that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Vanessa Rodriguez Barrera. I am a faculty member at RCC. I teach stats here and some of the intro to psychology classes. If I had to pick a class in undergrad that was my favorite, it would also probably be developmental psych. We had a fascinating teacher that had a lab attached to the class, so we got to do lots of observation on children and just thinking about all the things that developed during those initial stages was amazing. And thinking about the sort of lifespan as a development also taught me a lot. So that's my favorite class.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so just again, as a couple of quick reminders before I hand it off, there is a link now in the chat to sign in. And like I said, as we're going through the presentation, if any questions come to you, please note those and we'll have a Q&A after. So now, yeah, let's go ahead and get started exploring different pathways in psychology and how you can plan for success on transferring in your time at community college. So I'll pass it along to our academic counselors. Thank you all so much for being here.
All right, and I will ask you to keep clicking through slides. Thank you so much. So first of all, I'm really excited to see the number of folks in the room. This is great. And I think what we tried to do as counselors is figure out what makes sense to talk from an overview perspective, and the overall message that we really want students to hear is how important it is to come see your counselor at each of your colleges, because the nuance can get really specific, and what one student wants or where one student is coming from can really affect their academic plan. And so we want to give you a lot of information today, but the takeaway is not all of this may apply to me, and I need to see my counselor to figure out which of it applies to me and which of it do I need to not worry about. So we're going to talk today about transfer. Most students will transfer to a Cal State or a UC, but we will briefly talk about transfer to privates and out of states as well. but we'll talk about the pathway from a community college to a Cal State, the pathway from a community college to a UC. We're going to talk about CalGETC, which is an acronym I want everyone to start hearing because it's new. It's a general education pattern, and we'll get into the details of that. I think our faculty in psychology will help us talk about finding interests and figuring out, you know, how to choose a subfield, because psychology is very broad. And as you heard from the introductions in here, there's a lot of variation and diversity within psychology. So choosing a subfield, how to pick a transfer school, who to contact, and then upcoming workshops. So that's our plan for tonight. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we thought we'd do is just start off with transfer options, and then we'll get into some of the details. In California, you've got, so I've been doing this for 20 years. There have always been 23 Cal States, but now there are 22. Fun fact, Maritime rolled into Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, so there are now 22 Cal States instead of 23, but there are lots of options within the California State University system. Almost all of those schools will have a psychology degree. There are 9 UCs for undergraduate admission. There's a 10th UC, which is for graduate school and professional schools. And then there's a whole bunch of privates and out of states that will each have their own sets of rules and regulations. And so it's harder to talk about them in an umbrella format because they're each going to have unique requirements or preferences for admission. But as a community college student, your goal is to focus on pretty much 3 parts. You need to have a list of general education done, a list of major preparation done, and for the Cal States and UCs, a total of 60 units. So as counselors, we're always working to make sure students have finished a pattern of general ed, have finished a list of requirements for their major, depending on where they're going, and then do they have 60 units? And those are the requirements there. And I think there's a question in the chat, and we'll come to some of them, but I just want to touch on it. Cal Polys are definitely part of the Cal State system. There are 3 Cal Polys that are Cal States, and the 3 Cal Polys are San Luis Obispo, Pomona, and now Humboldt. But it's Cal Maritime, which was a teeny tiny little Cal State, got blended into the Cal Poly San Luis Obispo campus. So that's why there's not 23 anymore, there's 22. As part of the transfer process, the ADT, the Associate's Degree for Transfer, is something that we have talked a lot about in the state of California. We're going to get into the details of it, but the Associate's Degree for Transfer is a pathway from the community college system to the Cal State system. That's what it was designed for. So for a lot of our students, following the AA for transfer or the ADT in psych makes a lot of sense. And then we'll go into the details of that in a little bit. Actually, Kyla, are you able to click on any one of those 3 hyperlinks there, either the Moreno Valley, Norco, or Riverside? Because they're pretty much the same. If your goal is to go to a Cal State as a psych major, you're going to have a list of requirements for your major that you would do here prior to transfer. And those are listed here. It would be the Psych C1000, the Psych 2, the Psych 9, the Psych 50, a statistics class, and an elective. I just kind of wanted to show you what those requirements are. And we're going to get into details later. Thank you, Kyla. You can thank you. Okay. And then I think what I want to talk about before we go to the next slide is that not all students need to follow the ADT. So you're going to hear commercials on the radio, you're going to hear the college, and you're going to see in the catalog, and you're going to see that when you apply to RCC district, we make you pick a major, and it's the AA for transfer in psych. Not all students should follow the ADT. And so we're going to talk a little bit about when should you follow it and when shouldn't you. And then that's when those appointments with the counselor really matter, because we can talk to you about your own individual goals to make sure that you should or shouldn't be following it. If you know you want to Cal State and you know you want to major in psychology, in almost all cases, you should follow the AA for transfer or the ADT in psych. For a student who has no intention of going to a Cal State, for a student who knows they want to go to a UC or out of state or private, they don't need to follow the AA for transfer because there's really no benefit to having it. But since a student has to get to 60 units anyways, a lot of times it makes sense to earn it. And a lot of times as counselors will encourage you to earn the AA for transfer in psych, just in case at the last minute you do decide to also apply to a Cal State, you'll have all the preparation required. I think you could go to the next slide. Thank you. Real quickly, we're using a lot of acronyms. For students that are brand new, this stuff isn't going to matter as much because you only know it in this one way. But for those of you that in the audience that were here last year, we have made some changes to our course numbers and to some of the offerings. And so we just kind of want to put this all out here. Psych C1000 used to be Psych 1. And in the whole state of California at all community colleges, it is now titled Psych C1000. So that is a new acronym that all of us in this room are trying to get used to. Doesn't roll off the tongue quite as nicely as Psych 1 does. And Math 12 is now Stat C1000. So if any of you are looking at a list of requirements and it says you need Stat C1000, don't panic if you already took Math 12. It's the same class. It counts the same way. It's just has a different course number now. So don't panic too much about that. But also on the flip side, if you haven't done it yet, if you search in the system for Mat 12, you're not going to find it. You got to look under Stat C1000. So Psych C1000 is previously Psych 1. Stat C1000 is previously Mat 12. Psych 48 has been around, and that's Stats for Social Sciences. It was PSY 48 at 3 units, and now it's PSYC 48 at 4 units. And the system is very literal. If you type in PSY 48, you won't find it. You got to type in PSYC in order to find it if you're looking to register for it. But it is 4 units now. And then there are students who are required to take stats with support. Those students are typically students that didn't do Algebra 2 in high school. And prior to, I think, fall, Stat C1000 or Math 12 was the only stats class that had support. And now we're so happy that Psych 148 and Social 148 exists. So students who need support, who didn't have Algebra 2 in high school, or who feel like they want a refresher, can take Psych 48 and Psych 148 together in the same semester. It's a 6-unit load. You take it with the same professor, the same students. You're getting content from high school Algebra 2 that's helpful in the moment as you're learning the statistics stuff. So it's a great option for students who maybe want the social science lens but need the support. So I tell students, even if you're not required to take math with support, it's like a nice little insurance policy. And if you're hesitant at all about your abilities in math, taking it with support is a good way to just assure that you're going to get as much as you can out of your class and do well in it. It is a 6-unit load, so you have to be careful with what else you take in that semester. But it's a good way to just assure yourself that you can get through your math in one semester. Just as a note, there are other classes that will be changing to this C1000 or C2100 or C1200. So as you start to see courses in the system, English is another example. So there's a lot of stuff coming. And we just want students to know to look for those changes, or if you are looking for a class and you can't find it, reach out to us to see if by chance it has a new name. think that's it for that slide. Maria, are you good starting on this one, or do you?
I'm good at starting
Okay.
on this one. Thank you. As long as you all can hear me okay. You can see in the picture that even just as of spring, just last year, last academic year, it was that picture shows 23 campuses. So thank you, Karen, for bringing that up for sure. But it's still, there's value to this picture that is because you're able to see a common question from the students is where are they located, right? And you're able to see where each one of the colleges are located or universities. And we're very fortunate that we have several universities surrounding us here. Many programs like this particular slide talks about the Cal States. Like Humboldt State has a lot of online programs. I know here we're talking about psychology, but sometimes students are interested in becoming social workers later, right? They get a degree in psychology and they may jump into social work later on if they are interested in that. I mean, there are schools like I know Humboldt State was working on having an online programming for a social work program where students can actually just fly once a semester and everything else is online. That is, if you're interested, we're looking at master's programs. We're looking at graduate studies later on. If that's something that you're curious about, psychology can also lead to that. Or working with us, in the field of social services. Anyway, overall, my job right now is to go over a little bit of transfer requirements. Now, this part is the one that is very, very number-based. So hang in there with me. I was thinking, give me the fun part, but this one is numbers. So hang in there with me here. Students will need to complete their freshman and sophomore years of college here to transfer as juniors to universities, right? So usually 30 units tend to be the completion of your freshman year of school at the colleges. That's the minimum that you need to have, but they need to be the right transferable units. And then your sophomore year will be 30 units. So altogether, you'll need 60 Cal State transferable units, which must include the following for the Cal State, right? It includes, they call it the Golden Four for sure. Those are critical courses that students need to go to a Cal State. The Golden Four includes oral communications like COM 1000 or C1000, ring communications, that will be the English, an English course, English 1B, that will be the critical thinking, that will be number 3, and of course, a transferable math. This past years, we had, many of you probably are familiar with the intersegmental general education transfer curriculum or the Cal State general education patterns. We will talk about it more in detail later on, but starting this year, the state merged the two, and now we have what it's called CalGETC. And I know it was introduced earlier, but overall, the idea is to combine the general education requirements with your major requirements. And that will give you your freshman and sophomore years of college here at Moreno Valley, Norco or Riverside, right? If you can click on the CalGETC link kindly, I know we're going to talk about this shortly. This one here is for Riverside, right? And you can see that each section, it actually addresses how many units you need from each section, right? So it will tell you for a minimum of 3 courses. And here you said you will see English, English C1000, then you say you will have English to meet the critical thinking part. You have options such as English 1B and on and on. Each section will tell you how many units you need. So for instance, for area 2, for general education, you need a minimum of 3 to 4 semester units in this case, right? And if some students have transcripts from other schools, so if you do have transcripts from another school, we encourage you to come and talk to us because the quarter units transfer very different. There's a different number of units that transfer into a semester units. And you can see for the psychology majors, very likely students will actually take stats C1000 or Psych 48, depending on the major or the school. If if you're pursuing neuropsychology, for instance, that there may be variations of what type of math you have to take, depending on the school where you want to transfer to, especially for out-of-state schools. They may ask for calculus, right? If you're pursuing neuropsychology in a specific institution, it's good to connect with one of us to make sure that you're taking the right math course. But generally speaking, for the psychology associate's degree for transfer, if that's what you're pursuing, Psych 48 works definitely pretty well as statistics, generally speaking, right? For area 3, it tells you that you basically, you need only a minimum of 2 courses for the CalGETC, one from area 3A and one from area 3B. If you can scroll up a little bit. Okay. Okay. So you have a lot of choices. For psychology, it doesn't really matter. You have all those options, right? Just really quickly, if you can keep scrolling down. From area 4 is mostly your major and another elective. So you're going to see a long list of courses connected to psychology or sociology, right? That's many, or early childhood studies. I find that depending on which pathway you're going to follow, that this area becomes very critical for you to start selecting areas of interest. You only need 2 courses, but from 2 different groups. So you can take psychology and something else, right? I've seen people interested in the criminal justice field, so then they take administration of justice. I've seen people interested in early childhood studies, so they take early childhood studies 20. I've seen people interested in marriage and family relations. So if you scroll down, you might see sociology 20 and there, right? So let me see. Actually, sociology 12. So marriage and family relations. So they take those courses. So you can combine based on your interest. On the next page, you will notice, if you don't mind, click into the next one. Scroll down a little. Yeah, that will be area 5. Area 5, only 1 class from area 5A and 1 class from area 5B. From 5B, you will notice that there's Psych 2, Psychology 2. So if you select Psychology 2 from area 5B, that means that from area 5A, then you need a class that's underlined that has a lab, right? It has to have a lab, and a lot of people, depending on their choices, they can do from geography, but a lot of people do chemistry or something related to chemistry. Let's say if they're interested in working with individuals with substance abuse later in life, then chemistry may be something that's relevant to them or useful. So you start thinking ahead as you are selecting your courses and what will prepare you. Okay, very good. And then last but not least, on area 6, you only need 1 class from area 6, and any of those courses will be very useful. If you make a choice to go to a Cal State, however, there are some areas, if you scroll down, you only need 1 class from area 6. It tells you how many units in there. If you scroll down real quickly to the next, there are graduation requirements depending on what school you want to transfer to. Instead of getting into all the details, I encourage you to come and talk to us, because some of these can be, it just depends. It just depends where you want to transfer to. If you make a choice to go to a UC, there will be some variations. You know, there may be a language other than English requirement that you have to fulfill. If you make a choice to go to a Cal State system, you will notice that you can combine some of the course requirements for graduation at the Cal State with the other requirements connected to the IGETC. In other words, it can count in 2 different areas. But again, for that one, I encourage you to come and talk to us so we can go into more detail. Feel free to jump in later on, Karen and Sina, but I think this is just a quick intro. Stay tuned and come talk to us and we can go over this in more detail. And please feel free to ask questions. Can you take these courses here, graduation requirements at Moreno Valley College, Norco, or Riverside? Can you take them here and they will count out of Cal State? Yes. Can they count in other areas? Yes. Is it good to talk to a counselor? Yes. So we can connect on this. Can we go back to the there you go, to the presentation. So this kind of sums up about the Cal States, right? Can we go to the next? And we do have the IGETC and the CSU. For those of you that, we just went over the IGETC, but for those of you that have attended Moreno Valley College, Norco, or Riverside for before this year, to have units already, you may be eligible, you are eligible for catalog rights. So you have a choice to continue with Cal State, CSU General Education Pathway, or the IGETC, or the CalGETC. So you have choices. Again, I think instead of getting into all the details of this applies to you, this applies to you, it's best if you come and talk to us. We just want to introduce you to let you know that you are eligible for catalog rights. Let's see which one of the 3 pathways work for you the best, and then we'll be happy to support you with that. In terms of transferring to a Cal State, what do you need? A minimum, and the key here is minimum. The minimum of a 2.0 CSU transferable GPA. Now, are you very competitive with the 2.0? For your major, you're saying you love psychology? Try to go for the B, try to go for the A, if possible, right? Because you're saying, I love psychology. Okay, let's get something better than a C, right? A 2.0 is a C, if possible, right? But a minimum to get into a Cal State is a 2.0 in terms overall GPA, but the major may require a higher GPA, okay? So GPA requirements, again, they are definitely higher depending on the major, the school, and the area of study that you select within psychology, or the field of study, the discipline, okay? We already talked about psychology ADT and RCC, and there are various there. We already introduced the CalGETC. Again, we have, what is CalGETC, CSUGE, or IGETC certification? So when you complete all the units that are listed on the CalGETC, when you're about to transfer, you can request IGETC, CalGETC, or CSU certification. And what that means is that the Riverside Community College District, your home college, will declare that, or guarantee that you have completed, or certified that you have completed your general education requirements here. Therefore, you don't have to take them once you get there. Okay, that's the key there. There is a process to request those transcripts. When you request your final transcript is when you select yes to to get the certification before you actually transfer to a 4-year. Usually it's the spring semester when you're applying for transfer, when you request those final transcripts. Again, we'll be happy to walk you through this process, but just know that you have that right to request that certification ahead of time. Let's see, can we go to the next one? Regarding, this is slide number 9. Okay, regarding the CalGETC, we just went over that, and the IGETC and the CSUs, we're just gonna click them real quickly so you can become familiar with them, because you might have seen it already. Can you click IGETC, if you don't mind, please? For those of you that have met with a counselor before, usually they have specific colors, like at Moreno Valley, it's blue. Right? It continues to be blue. If you were following the IGETC, we just went over the same, you read this the same way, the same pattern is there. You will notice that each section has different unit requirements, but the takeaway from this is that there are differences. For instance, area 1C, you will notice that your students had the option to do communications 1, communications 2, communications 6, communications 9. For the CalGETC, right now, the only course listed is communications 1. So if you haven't taken communications, moving forward, make sure you remember to take Com 1, right? So again, going back to this, we're not going to go over all of this. I'm encouraging you to come talk to us because there are changes, right? There are discussions like if students took communications 9, we can still potentially waive that this year. So we'll talk about that as when you come and visit. But this is the introduction. Again, IGETC stands for Intersegmental General Education Transfer Curriculum. Units listed here are transferable to the UC, the Cal State system, as well as many private schools and out-of-state schools. Same thing with CalGETC. Some private schools also accept CalGETC, but it just depends. Very good. Thank you. Just really quickly about the CSU, if you don't mind going back to that. Click on the CSU. You will notice differences. Again, some of you will have catalog rights. And those of you that are new this semester or started this summer, then you will continue following the CalGETC. But if you took classes before, then you probably are familiar with this pattern. Something that's different on this pattern, if you can go to area E, if you can scroll down. On the new pattern, you will not see area E. So some students took courses connected to our disciplines, such as guidance courses, or maybe developmental psychology, psychology 10, psychology 11, psychology 33, sociology 12. Even military individuals that were in the military, they were able to get some units here as well. So once again, when you connect with us, we can revisit to see which one of these 3 pathways are best for you. Just wanted to bring that up to your attention, that there are some differences. Very good. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. And then just to summarize, the general education transfer patterns, what are they? You have 3. But starting this year for fall 2025, only CalGETC will be the primary pattern. And it will become, it is one of the universal general education transfer patterns that will be available for students moving forward. The CalGETC replaces both, just to summarize, the IGETC and the CSU general education patterns in 2025. Again, please remember, come see us. Private institutions may have different transfer requirements than what the Cal States and the UCs have. So especially some specific programs at the university may have additional admission requirements. So be mindful of those differences. But again, overall, it is the CalGETC kind of helps a lot of students capture the general education requirements here, their options.
Maria, if you don't mind, if I can add to just to clarify, because we have students from throughout the district in here. A lot of you all probably know that you can take classes at each college. So you might take one class at Moreno Valley and another class at Riverside and another class at Norco, or possibly even at other community colleges in the state of California, or maybe you did in the past. Each community college, even within our district, has a CalGETC outline. So RCC has a CalGETC outline, Moreno Valley, Norco does. The classes that fit into each outline are college specific. So the list of Riverside classes that fit in Area 4 might look different than the list of MoVal classes that fit in Area 4. So especially because of all the changes that happened this summer, if we could encourage you as students, if you're going to be taking a class outside of your home college, whether it's even in our district or Irvine Valley or something like that, if you could check with your counselor to make sure that the class works the same way that you thought it was going to work. The ethnic studies classes went through a big change this summer. And so there are classes even within our district that count one way if you take it at MoVal and a different way if you take it at Riverside. And so it's really important for students when you plan to take a class outside of your home college to fulfill CalGETC or IGETC or CSU, that you make sure that just because it has the same title doesn't automatically mean it's going to work the same way. So just check with your counselor on that one.
And Thank you. And for convenience, we put the link here. If we put the link of each of the CalGETs for each college, right? Thank you for adding that. And I think what is also very critical is that the courses are not just that they are also articulated. We're going to talk about articulation. What's articulated for the major, and I think that's for my friend Sina. She's about to talk about that now, right? Because there are differences. Just because it articulates for one college, it may not articulate for another college. Thank you.
All right, I have the next slide. So we're going to just kind of do a quick review, but get ready for transfer to a UC. There's 4 basic transfer areas that students will focus on prior to transfer. So Maria went over the IGETC if you are under older catalog rights and reviewed that, the IGETC. If you see to the right of the pictures, you'll see all of the campuses from University of California. So for those of you who are looking into UC, they have their campuses. They also have a different set of preparation for your major courses. Just a reminder that ADTs or the AA degrees in psychology are primarily for Cal State. So you can follow the IGETC or the CalGETC, and then you will be looking at assist.org for the major preparation. Some quick reminders is like a formula for transfer is you now know about the general ed, whichever path you've been following, and then you're going to be looking at major preparation. So it's general ed plus major prep. You may take some transferable courses to the UC or Cal State, and that would equal your transfer. It should be about 60 units. Sometimes students take a little more, but they are looking for that 60 units. A minimum required transferable units is the 60 units. Sorry, let me do that. And then minimum required GPA. So there's specific requirements vary depending on the college or university and the major. The UCs will have a different, they have a different GPA. So if you want to go to the next slide, just some reminders here. So the University of California, it's a UC transfer overview. Students are you're going to be completing the CalGETC or the IGETC from your prior catalog rights. And note that some of the majors and programs do not accept CalGETC fulfillment. I'm not sure this applies totally to psychology, but if those of you who are also looking into science or maybe a science aspect along with psychology, there is other GE that the UCs are looking for. So like the College of Natural Science GE that may show up on assist.org. So assist.org is where you're going to look at your major prep. You do need to earn 60 semester units or 90 quarter units. In our case, it's 60 semester units, and making sure that those classes that you're taking are UC transferable courses. Sometimes you're taking kinesiology or elective units along with your full-time load or your load that you're carrying. And you need to be looking at those classes if they are CSU and UC transferable. Some of them just may be CSU transferable. So always check with your counselor and make sure that when you do develop a plan that you're looking for that 60 units at the end of the plan. If you have 59 or 57, a university such as the UC or CSU can deny you. Okay, and so we have seen those, and counselors never want that to happen to you. So always see a counselor. I always say see a counselor at the middle of the term or early in the term so that you can be aware of deadlines, and we could also plan accordingly to get all your units. Some campuses participate in the UC tag, and we're going to talk about that. So if you want to get a transfer admission guarantee to a UC, we offer that with Norco, Moreno Valley, and Riverside. We have community colleges have an agreement to guarantee your admission to a UC, just like the ADTs for a Cal State. The UCs have their tag program. You must have a minimum transferable GPA of 2.4 or 2.8 for non-resident or international students. But note that some majors might have higher GPA requirement. With psychology, you're one of the top 4 majors in the in UC and CSU, so they can be very competitive. UCLA versus UC San Diego versus UC Berkeley, UC Irvine. Our nearby university is UC Riverside. They do give preference or may look at us first and our RCCD district before they look at general students from outside community colleges. All right, next slide. And then just to show you on getting ready to transfer, making sure that you're deciding on your major, planning early. Using assist.org, exploring your majors also helps you look at all the UCs and CSUs that offer your major. Sometimes students will meet with the counselor and they'll say, I want to study psychology at this university. And then we look it up and it may not offer that major or the emphasis or concentration that you're seeking. And you can look at assist.org on your own to explore majors and look at the major preparation from Norco or from Riverside or from Moreno Valley to look at it's called articulation, what you take here at the community college, which they're taking there at the UC, so that when you transfer, you'll have all your major preparation completed. And then choosing your campus, so having an idea of what university you want to go to. With the transfer admission guarantee, there is a tag matrix that the counselors will look at to make sure that your UC offers that agreement. And then there may be specific requirements within that transfer agreement guarantee that you need to meet in order to be eligible to apply for the tag. There's 9 of the UC campuses offer undergraduate education. UC San Francisco focuses on health education and only offers graduate degrees. So really looking at the differences of those UCs for you. Okay, next slide. And then what is a UC transfer admission guarantee? How can you guarantee admission to a UC? So it's important to know that you can guarantee admission to a UC, but it's only of the participating UC campuses. And so you'll see those right there. It is 6 UC campuses: UC Davis, UC Irvine, Merced, Riverside, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. You can, if there's a school that you really want to go to, you can guarantee admission to one of those schools if you meet the eligibility and the requirements from the tag matrix. You still can apply to all your other UCs that you want to, your UCLA, UC San Diego, or any of the UCs that are not listed on the tops on those 6 transfer tag UCs, but these ones would offer you a guarantee if you're looking for that one UC. And it's just that, again, the tag is a set of transfer requirements when completed, guarantees the student admission to it doesn't say, but to one of the 6 participating UC campuses. And again, you can apply to all the UCs regularly, but the tag guarantees it to one. If you look to the right, the tag key dates and deadlines, these dates are very different than your regular application deadlines. So if you're thinking about guaranteeing admission, you want to plan ahead, plan early, and then you would be applying for your transfer admission guarantee prior to your regular admission application for transfer. So for example, students who wanted to guarantee their transfer for next year, they applied September 1 through 30th, and then they're applying regularly October 1 through November 30th for UC this fall for next fall. So if you're going to be thinking about transfer, you want to plan early, and you want to usually think about the year prior. Did you want to say anything, Karen?
No.
Okay, because sometimes I forget some of these, but it's usually like if I'm thinking I'm going to finish up this next year, I should be applying this year. So fall for the next fall, spring for the next spring, but meeting with the counselor earlier in the prior to the middle of the term so that we can get you ready for your dates and deadlines.
And I can jump in real quickly because there's a question in the chat. I hope that answers the question for when to apply for transfer. A good rule, I always tell my students, and I try to think about that, is Thanksgiving, right? For those of you that, if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, it's okay, but turn it in before Thanksgiving, otherwise no turkey for you. Just remember that. I know the deadline is December 2nd this year, right?
December 1st.
December 1st, I'm sorry. That's right, December 1st. Thank you. But always think about it. A lot of students try to fill out the application during Thanksgiving break, and it overwhelms the system. So the suggestion is always start as early as you can. Can you start completing the tap and the tag, to start that process early? Yes. Can we support you with that? Absolutely. And I think the question was answered already by my colleague, that you apply this fall to go in next fall, the year before. Thank you.
Okay, those were my slides. We're going to go to slide 15. And Karen, were you doing that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just, and we're not going to get into too much detail about each individual scenario, but what we want to make sure you know is that if your goal is to transfer to a Cal State, the AA for transfer and psych is really all you have to worry about. It's one list of classes, and we showed it to you at the beginning, those 6 psychology related classes that will prepare you to a Cal State. The UCs, though, don't operate uniformly. They all have slightly different requirements, preferences, levels of impaction, etc. And so assist.org is the website you can use to find out which classes are required for UC Riverside psychology, which classes are required by UC San Diego, UC Irvine, UCLA. They're all going to be slightly different. It makes it a little difficult for the student's perspective because they have to follow a list of classes to apply to UCR and maybe a slightly different list of classes to apply to UC Irvine. But as you work with the counselor, we'll talk with you about what is your top choice goal, and we'll make sure you're fully prepared for that particular campus, especially if it's one of the competitive UCs. And so I don't think we'll show you assist.org today because there's so much finite detail to it that might not apply to a group of 80 students with different goals. But assist.org is a website that we use to find out the major preparation for each of the different UCs. And so just make sure that you know assist and that you use it with your counselor and or on your own. And then let's see, for private schools, you really do need to work with each private school independently. A lot of private schools in California are starting to accept the AA for transfer, the ADT, because they know it's such a common way for students to take classes. So as an example, Cal Baptist is one of our local private schools. They fully accept the AA for transfer in psych. Redlands does, as far as I know. And a lot of the private schools locally will accept the AA for transfer. Arizona State is out of state. They will accept the AA for transfer. So as you're starting to research each private school or out of state school separately, you'll find out what their minimum requirements are and if they accept the AA for transfer or not. But because the UCs are more research-oriented universities, they were designed for the purpose of research. Most psychology majors in the UC system will feel more science-oriented. There will be more math usually associated. One really common example for students that want to go to UCR is that in addition to statistics, they need to take Math 5, which is short calculus or calculus for the life sciences. So it is an extra math class. For some students, that changes their top goal. But for other students, it's just a matter of, you know what your top goal is. That school requires Math 5. Let's get you into it and through it as soon as possible. And so the sooner you start to explore where you want to transfer to and what major you want at that school, and the more frequently you come in and talk to your counselor about those goals, the more accurately we can advise you as to your classes. So for a student who tells me my top choice is UCR, I've always wanted to go there, then we let them know to take Math 5 right away. If a student says, I'm really sure I want to go to a Cal State, but I'm thinking about Math 5, or I'm thinking about UCR, then we will let the student know, let's hold off on you taking Math 5 until you're sure, and then we'll tackle it when you know you want to apply to the UC. So there are differences. The sooner you do your research and come talk to your counselor, the more accurately we can guide you through all of that really important detail. Next slide, please. This is just an example of what you would find on assist.org and in your research. Different UCs will have different emphases within psychology. And as you're going to hear from the psychology faculty, and you probably already know, there's a lot of diversity within the field of psychology. And you already heard from us, some of us studied the brain, some of us studied learning and cognition, some of us studied more social science aspects. And just as an example, at UC San Diego, they've got, 10 different concentrations within psychology. Some schools will have a Bachelor of Arts versus a Bachelor of Science. That usually means, a BS usually means that it's a more research-oriented program. But it does change the kinds of classes you're taking as well. But this is really a good example of if someone knows for sure what they want to study and UC San Diego has that concentration, whereas another school doesn't, then that might steer the student towards UC San Diego. And then we need to look at what are the requirements for human health, and let's look and see if that's really your top choice. What classes should you be doing at Riverside or Norco or Movau before you apply to San Diego? We don't need to talk too much about graduate studies, but just a lot of times with psychology majors, I will have them think about what they want to do as their career and know that the graduate level degree is probably the one that determines the career path you're going into, and your bachelor's degree in psych is usually a stepping stone to that. So if you know what you want as a career, we would then look to see what master's degree works and then which bachelor's degree applies. And Maria mentioned earlier, social work, or some students want to do marriage and family therapy or school counseling. There's a huge variety that usually comes with clarification at the master's degree level. I think that's the end of our slides, but I wrote down a couple notes as we were talking just real quickly. If any of you students have AP credit, which is advanced placement credit from high school, please see a counselor regarding how to use that AP credit. And that's just a disclaimer. If you know that applies to you, talk to your counselor about the AP credit. I also wanted to talk real quickly about the benefits to earning that AA for transfer. If you're applying to a Cal State, you are given a 0.1 boost to your GPA. So if you finish all of your transferable coursework at a 3.0, when you have the AA for transfer, you're added a 0.1, so they will review you as if you're a 3.1. That 0.1 may or may not make a difference, but it could put you over the hump of the GPA cutoff that those schools are looking for. So you are given a 0.1 boost to your GPA. When you earn the AA for transfer, you're guaranteed a spot in the Cal State system. So you are guaranteed a spot at one of the 22 campuses, not at the campus of your choice. But if you apply to Fullerton and Long Beach and Pomona, and maybe your GPA isn't quite competitive enough for those 3 schools and your application is denied, when you have the AA for transfer, you will be offered a spot somewhere, and you have the opportunity to say yes or no to that offer. But that's it's called a degree with a guarantee, which sounds better than it is, because the guarantee is somewhere in California, and sometimes you have to look on a map to find out where that Cal State is, but you are guaranteed a spot somewhere in the system. And then the one other thing I just wanted to emphasize, and Maria mentioned it, is that December 1st is the application deadline. If you want to be at a Cal State or UC in fall of 26, December 1st of 2025 is the application deadline for both systems. If you want to meet with a counselor before then to make sure you're going to have all the right requirements done by the end of spring, you don't have to have your 60 units and everything done right this minute. You have to have those requirements done by the end of spring semester. So you could meet with us to find out if that's realistic. If so, hit submit on those applications by December 1st. And then I just wanted to make sure you knew that. I think that was it on the details, unless anybody else had anything to add.
Let me just jump in real quickly, one more thing, and that's just based on a question on the chat as well. If you are finishing in the fall, historically many programs are open from in the fall semester, and they move students in cohorts, right? But if you finish it, like if your intent is to be admitted in the spring semester, or if your intent is to be admitted in different, not necessarily in the fall, but let's say winter or spring quarter, there are different deadlines for that, definitely. And I put in the chat an example of the deadlines for the Cal State system, for instance. Usually in the summer, just to answer your question, Miriam, in the summer, students will apply sometime in August to actually apply for the following spring semester if that program is open, because not all programs are open and not all majors are open. So that's good to continue to check, okay? And one last thing, and that I would like to just answer real quickly. If you're not pursuing psychology, I see the comment, what if I'm pursuing engineering or something different, not psychology? Well, there are specific courses that you need to take for engineering, right? And we can definitely connect with you separately if you would like. But usually if you're in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math, usually it's a year of physics, a year of calculus, a year of upper division bio or chemistry, physics. It depends, right? Let's just figure out which engineering you're planning to pursue, and we'll be super happy to help you when your schedule permits. Set up an appointment, and we'll be happy to support you with that, because that one requires a little more processing and going over the details. Thank you.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, counselors. Thank you so much for all that information. And I know everyone here is probably thinking about all the classes they've taken, the classes they're gonna take, right? And how we even mentioned that, you know, even deciding what you want to do after might be necessary as psychology major, since a lot of the degrees that we kind of and the jobs that we want as psychologists do require either a master's or graduate level education, right? So it's good to start thinking about what specific type of psychology do you want to study. And here's what I'm just going to go into a ton of these different subfields. I'm going to include a little link in the chat right now just to show you. You can look at them even further from APA, the American Psychological Association. That's kind of neatly organized kind of most of the fields in psychology. As we said with the previous example, right? This one school had all these different types of psychology, right? But they did not have every single one of them, right? So again, you want to start narrowing it down from there to see what school you might want to go to. Do the school that you want to go to actually offer the program you'd like? And so let's just jump into some of these many categories here. Some of them are more on, you know, focusing on patient and client interactions. Some of them more focus on research. Let's discuss just some of the ones here. Again, look at the link if you'd like to go look at them in a little bit more in detail. So let's go ahead and first start off with the first one, brain science and cognitive psychology. So this type and this subdiscipline within the field of psychology is studying how the mind thinks, remembers, and learns, and applying psychological science to understand how we make decisions and perceive the world, right? So again, every time you see the word cognitive, again, think about the word thinking, right? Evaluating all of those processes of how we make decisions. Clinical psych, which is going to be a very popular one that a lot of students always like to go into. Clinical psychology is where essentially now you're integrating now science, psychology, and the treatment of many complex human problems, human interactions again. And this is more, again, like I was saying, more of that client-facing type of psychology that you'd be going down into. Next that I'll discuss very quickly is counseling psychology, where counseling psychologists focus primarily on facilitating personal and interpersonal functions across the lifespan of the individual, right? It could be counseling, kind of how we see it now here at the kind of post kind of K through 12 education, but it could be even more beyond this individual's life. Again, think about a counselor potentially even leading to some social work. Then we'll go into the psychology of, I don't see it in my list. Oh, it is there. Educational or school psychology, right? Or even psychology of teaching and learning. So a lot of times these psychologists in this type of subdiscipline within psychology focuses on learning and how we can get this learning to get better, right? So sometimes you might have a weird project in your class or some sort of weird kind of group work in your class, and right, and know that most of these things are coming from research that has been done within the field of learning, right? We don't just implement things that we don't have backing to say that they actually work. So you can actually do research and psychology research of how to learn. There's social psychology. Social psychology uses kind of the psychological lens of kind of sociology to understand how we perceive ourselves in relation to the rest of the world, how it affects our perception, our choices, behaviors, and beliefs, right? Think about any social interaction you've had, right? That most likely is in the realm of social psychology. sort of like this. And the last that I'll discuss is quantitative psychology. So even if you're engineering or more STEM based, right, quantitative psychology uses a lot of methodology, a lot of statistical techniques, a lot of math and stuff to, again, measure human behavior, attributes, do a lot with mathematical modeling using a bunch of different programs. Again, if you even are really good at programming and coding, this is something that maybe you'd be interested in, right? So again, psychology can be pretty much almost anything that you can kind of think of, whether it's interacting with patients, doing research on your own, right? Again, interacting and evaluating how social interactions happen, or even with math, right? So psychology is very broad and very, very, very complex. And again, it's good to start thinking about what you like to do, what you want to do potentially for a graduate level degree, because again, not every school will have what you want to study for master's level and even the bachelor's level. So it's good to think about that very, very soon. Cool. I think I'm done. Hand it off to Dr. Wilson.
Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Perez just went over a bunch of different subfields in psychology, and obviously psychology is really diverse and broad, with lots of different fields within it, right? So you do want to explore some of those subfields, right? And use that link that he put in the chat. That's really helpful for that. I'm just going to share some tips for how you can further refine your interests from there. So one thing that you could do is to evaluate which psychology courses you enjoy the most. So this requires you to take a variety of different psychology courses, right? If you're somebody who you realize you really like your abnormal psychology class, you might be more interested in taking the clinical psych route, because that deals with psychological disorders, right? If you are really enjoying your research methods class, we can pull you over to the research side of things, right? When you're refining your interests, you will also want to think about your own strengths and weaknesses. So if you're a really empathetic and patient type of person, those are really great strengths to have as a counseling psychologist, a clinical psychologist, right? If you tend to be maybe more reserved, you think you're going to get burnt out from talking to a bunch of people throughout the day, that's something to consider about yourself before maybe going down that path. And maybe you want to consider something more research oriented. So this will also tie into your preferred work environment. So as you're thinking about different subfields, different careers, you can also think about the type of environment you want to work in. So do you see yourself in an office or a medical setting or a research lab setting, maybe a college or a university, or maybe you want to move around a bit, work with communities, work in the field somehow. That will help you to kind of narrow down the path you want to take. And along with that, think about the population of people that you might be most interested in working with. Maybe it's students, maybe you want to help people who are struggling with addiction, or maybe you want to work with other psychologists, other researchers in like a lab type of setting. Something like that would maybe help you to determine the type of career path you want to take. Now, of course, we will always suggest that you talk to your professors, and we can help, kind of help you to evaluate what might be a good path for you, just through conversations, what we know about these different career or fields in psychology. Read some literature, read some psych studies, read things to see, where is your interest truly in psychology. Watch presentations, attend workshops like these. We have in the spring coming up a careers in psychology workshop. We don't have the exact day yet, but keep that in mind. And then any extra learning you do about psychology and its subfields is going to help you narrow that stuff down. And then the last thing I'll say is try and become a research assistant if you can. This will be an opportunity most likely when you transfer. So when you do transfer, immediately try to seek out a research assistant position if you can. And you might be someone who thinks, I'm not actually interested in going into research, or I don't know that that's really what I am interested in. But you really don't fully know until you try, right? But it's either way, it's a good experience to have for any career that you're going to potentially go into. And it's also a really good way to get experience to talk about for grad school applications, whether that's for clinical psychology or research psychology. They want to know that you have some familiarity with the science of psychology and how it gets produced. So that is a really good idea to hit the ground running as a transfer student. As soon as you get there, just start seeking those opportunities out, and you can find information about research labs on a school's website usually, and reach out directly to ask about openings or look for an application and reach out directly too. Let them know, I'm a transfer student, I'm coming in and I want to hit the ground running, and do you have a spot for me? And it's scary to send those emails, but it can really change the trajectory of things for you, maybe. Okay, and you can also often get unit credit for your research assistant position. So it kind of like counts as a class, depending on where you go. Okay, that's all I have to say. I will pass it off to talk about how to pick a transfer school.
Yes, so thank you. I'm just going to touch upon some of these points. I know we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that we leave space for questions. If students have them, I assume you have them, I have them. So thinking about what would make you decide on a specific Cal State or a specific UC, or even between a Cal State and a UC, how do you go about deciding that, or how do I start navigating, 22 campuses? So these are just sort of some pointers about how to try and identify what schools you would want to go to, or which would work best for you and your goals. So one is obviously you want to think about what your career or educational goals are as best that you can. So thinking about, am I interested in a specific career? Do I see myself as a marriage and family therapist? Then that might be a clue to sort of figure out which schools have faculty that teach, right, or have a specialty in clinical psychology. And I would say even a bonus point would be which are the Cal States that have a master's, a master's in family therapy, because then it would sort of give you a foot in the door to where those graduate degrees are already located. And believe it or not, it matters a lot because the faculty that teach the graduate program, if there is one, will be teaching the undergrads as well. So it's good to sort of, I know it's kind of early thinking about what I would do after the bachelor's, but if you have an idea, use that to sort of define where you would want to transfer to. Obviously, other suggested criteria for your decision are thinking about the level of education, the quality of education that you would get. I would say all of the Cal States have a great educational system, but some are renowned for more like health-oriented kind of specialties. Some are more oriented towards social aspects in terms of psychology. Think about class size, right? So in deciding whether to go to a UC versus a Cal State, any of those sort of undergraduate courses might have 300 people in them, or they might have, more like 50 people in them. Which of those situations do you feel like would be most useful to you and your career goals or your preferences? The kind of stress that you might be experiencing, right, in a super competitive environment might not be very useful to your career goals if you can just as well sort of succeed at another college that has a less competitive environment. Um, Thinking about the academic experiences that you might have. So, how many research labs are there? Of course, because the UCs are geared towards research, they're going to have tons of labs that students can join. So, you are much more likely to be able to have access to those experiences. But that does not mean that the Cal States do not have those opportunities. It's really up to you to go and seek them and be proactive and take that initiative to be involved and get your sort of networking feet wet so that you can find who are the people that are doing the things that would be useful in my resume, academically speaking. Of course, the work or experiences that you can get outside of just attending class, right? It might be, again, located in a particular place that is close to family or close to friends, or there might be really interesting internships or job opportunities that are in the area that might not be found somewhere else. Um, and of course, you want to take into account the cost of what it's going to be like attending those Cal States versus a UC. Of course, we all know there's certain schools that have much more prestige, right? And that will be useful in some sense because people know you by the name of the school that you went to. But that's not always sort of the primary I should say, thing that you should worry about. I would be much more worried about leaving with debt, even if I have a title from somewhere, that might open the door to somewhere. Really take into account. I'm telling you from experience. And then, of course, deciding on those, what specialties do they have or what areas do these particular psychology departments focus on? You can find that out by looking at schools' faculty websites. So just do a Google search. I actually did this recently with a student. They knew they wanted to go for counseling or therapy, specifically a master's in family um, master's in family therapy. So we just looked at all the CSUs, looked at which campuses offer that degree, and then look at faculty that are teaching at those campuses and what are the research specialties, that they do. You can find sort of a little info about what their research interest is, what are the recent published papers that they have. And this particular student found like so many cool people that they were really excited and stoked to sort of be able to work along with. So yes, pay attention to who are the faculty and what do they teach, what is the research that they do. Of course, visit the schools if you have a chance. Meet with their admissions representative. I know that we have some representatives visiting the RCC campus here. So if those opportunities arise, even if you're just curious or you think you might be interested, go talk to them, like make appointments, find information. Of course, obviously, talk to a counselor or faculty member at your current school. I'm happy to chat with students because one of the other things that I can do is I can sort of tell them about my own experience. I know some of the faculty at some of the Cal States. I know what it's like to have been at a Cal State coming from a community college. I know what it's like at this particular UC, so I can give you some insight information that you won't find on any of those websites. And again, we're more than happy to share that information. So I will leave it at that. I know that we want to have some time for questions or I don't know if there's a couple more slides left, but thank you.
Yes. Okay. So we do have just the contact information here. But yeah, I think it would be great to transition to a Q&A. We'll close up the session talking about some upcoming workshops and have a link for any feedback or suggestions you have for future sessions. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can have some student questions with the last bit of time that we have here today. I'm not sure if anyone got questions, or if you want to raise your hand, you can do that and we can unmute you, or if you wanted to put questions in the chat, if there's anyone who's received them throughout the session, the faculty and counselors can jump in.
There was a student that asked if they missed the tag application, if that's at all a detriment. No, please don't worry if you missed the tag deadline. The regular UC application deadline is just fine. The tag is basically a way to sort of get early assurance, but it doesn't lessen your chances or anything like that. So don't worry about missing the tag deadline. You should worry about missing the December 1st deadline. No, that one you don't want to miss. So.
There was a comment of one student about the TAP transfer planner. The UCs and the Cal States have transfer planners. So you can even start completing your transfer planner today. You can start working on it and the representatives from the admissions office can look at it ahead of time and can give you feedback ahead of time. So sometimes we see the deadline of October, like the timeline to turn in the application for transfer as a deadline, right? October 1st to now December 1st. But students can start, like I had a group of students that we started working on the transfer planner as early as February of last semester. So by the time the application cycle open up, they're ready to turn it in. It's so much easier. So there is a process and we can definitely support you. Both systems have it. So in fact, there are benefits to it. If this is your first semester, you can start putting in the courses that you're doing now and the courses that you're planning to do. And there's a way to monitor that progress. You chat with the representative from the Cal State or the UC, and you're going to sound so smart saying, I have my TEP completed. I have a TEP account. And they will look at it and can give you feedback ahead, and they'll tell you opportunities, research opportunities coming up, internships or things of that nature early on, because they know you're interested in their school as well. So just those are just opportunities, and there's a tab. Someone put the tab of transfer planners, the link to the transfer planners on the chat for you.
I have a question in the chat. I want to pursue a career in research psychology, but can't seem to find out what the path could be for that or what subfields it's under. How can I get into internships or research assisting? So we can definitely speak to that one. For research psychology, um, that's really broad, right? You'd want to figure out a field that you want to, a subfield that you would want to research, but it's a good first step to know that you might be interested in research. And usually the thing that might help you to figure out what you want to research would be when you transfer, trying to get involved as a research assistant in a research lab. So Cal States and UCs will have research labs in some form. You can volunteer or get class credit for participating in research. Not as a participant, I mean as somebody who's helping the participant along in a study, something like that. Maybe you'd be data cleaning or doing any of the steps involved in getting a research project through. And that usually will help you to understand how to take the next step to figure out what you might want to research. So really, that will be an opportunity for when you transfer, usually, and take the research methods class that we have in RCCD also, if you haven't already. Anyone want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think whenever you are looking at, the transfer schools that you want to transfer to and you want to join a lab or research lab and be a research assistant, first kind of know what kind of psychology subfield you want to get into, whether it's cognitive psychology, developmental, social psychology. And then usually they have a list of faculty researchers, and they either have a website or they have a description of their lab to see like where you might want to fit in or what interests you have for whatever research they're doing. And that's really a good feel to know if they're accepting research assistants, if they're not accepting a particular semester, and really get a feel for if you're a good fit for that lab when you apply.
You can also jump in real quickly if you don't mind. Some UCs have undergraduate research available for students even at this level when you're completing your freshman or sophomore years, as long as you have the research, some sort of research class completed. In this case, it will be probably Psych 8. I'm sorry, Psychology 48. Today I'm getting my numbers wrong. Psychology 48, but for instance, I'll put it in the chat, and there's a list, any changes all the time. But here's a list just from UCR. If you're curious about it, they have opportunities. Again, I didn't pre-screen only for psychology, but this is for any research, the various research opportunities. It's a portal, and they're all undergraduate. So you are welcome to do that, and many of them are paid internships.
You can also join your psychology clubs. I know that MVC, RCC, and Norco all have a psychology club, so that's somewhere that you could learn a bit more. We're not necessarily doing research studies, but we talk about research, so that's something to get more involved in at the community college level, because I do have a question in the chat that asked, what do we do now while we're here? Beyond, taking Sci 48 statistics for the behavioral sciences, Sci 50 research methods, you want to take those for sure if you're interested in going down the research route. Okay, there might be some last minute questions, but we are at time here, and I want to thank the counselors for giving us this time. So I did put the slides in the chat, and I also put the sign-in form one more time, just in case you missed it. We will also be posting the recording for this on our YouTube channel. I'll drop a link in there to the YouTube channel again. So if you missed anything, it went kind of fast at any point, you can go back and watch that again. And thank you for coming. We hope to see you at the next one. However you found out about this one is how you'll find out about the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
If you still have remaining burning questions, you can drop it in our feedback form and we'll try and connect you with resources, but you also know how to contact the counselors, right? It's in the slides. And so that's really the best thing to do usually. Unless it's a psych-specific question, then contact us, your psych professors.
One question in the chat is, do I have to take COM 9? I took COM 9, do I have to take COM 1? I can suggest to meet with a counselor so we can take a quick look at your records. We'll be so happy to see which pathway will be better for you. Yeah, which one of the general education pathways.
Great, thank you, everyone.